I think the most important reason why this project is successful is that it has been genuine in its commitment to work in partnership with the residents.
Yes, well, no.
Because the buildings are only as good as the people that live in them.
It's very easy to come in and do a lot of talking. It's actually more important to come in and do a lot of listening.
Because regardless of what all these so-called professional people say, the ordinary folks do know quite a lot more if they're allowed to express themselves. They really do, you know. They really do. And if they just listen, there's a lot they could learn.
Housing estates in Britain are often in the headlines, but we usually hear about their problems. We hear much less about their considerable achievements, often against the odds. Groups of residents across the country, like this one from the Ramsden estate in Orpington, are working in partnership with local agencies to get the best out of their estates. Today, the group is visiting an estate in Hackney as part of a project within the Joseph Rowntree Foundation's Action on Estates programme. Its aim is to look at how residents can be fully involved in estate regeneration.
Why residents involved? Well, mainly because we live there. Let's tell people what we want changed and how we want them changed. But let's find out what everybody wants. And then if we've got lots of residents involved, then they're going to hopefully take pride because it's going to be the way they want to live.
If you leave it to outsiders, then they're just going to do what they want to do. They're just going to try and build it to make it look nice, make it look pretty, but not look at the material things, the important things. Whereas if you get the people who live there involved in it, it will be nice.
Come on.
It'll be how they want it.
The Action on Estates programme, started in 1992, has supported 33 research projects covering more than 100 estates. These have looked at what can be done to ensure that residents are major players in the physical, economic and social regeneration of their neighbourhoods. Much has been achieved, but the evidence suggests that there's still a lot to be learnt if official intentions about partnership with residents are to become a reality. Wheels are constantly being reinvented, and too much of what passes for involvement still feels like window dressing to residents themselves.
The attitude of people outside the estate that come up here, they've been there, they've done it, they've bought the t-shirt, but they haven't got a clue what it's like because they've never lived up there.
On this particular visit to Amherst Road in Hackney, residents from all of the 5 estates involved in the project are exchanging ideas, not only amongst themselves but with the representatives from the housing associations involved. A key aim is to make sure that improvements achieved are not short-term and superficial.
If the tenants do not take the lead in what happens on an estate, then experience shows that whatever is done will not last. It may be imposed for a time, but if it's not owned by the residents, it won't be sustained.
And that's one of the key messages from the Rowntree research programme. The purpose of this video is to share these key messages with policymakers, managers, practitioners and residents themselves. Regenerating estates is a complex business. There are no quick fixes. Residents bring enormous expertise to the job of regenerating estates, and solutions must be built on their strengths and priorities. But they can't be expected to turn around estates on their own. They'll need time and resources if they're to run their own services and play an effective part in multi-agency partnerships with the range of agencies that are needed to tackle all aspects of life on the estate. Professionals also need to be prepared to adjust their priorities and ways of working to fit in with residents. As well as improving services, concerted effort is needed to give residents opportunities for employment on and off the estate. Last but not least, ways have to be found of building strong local organisations that can attract income and last beyond special initiatives into the long term. The projects covered by the research were at various stages of their development and explored a wide range of themes. One of the most successful related to a small estate in Devonport, immediately next door to the naval headquarters and dockyards. The refurbishment of Pembroke Street has now been virtually completed, and the estate is run by residents through a highly professional estate management board, in spite of occasional interruptions. The Estate Management Board, or EMB as they're usually called, are now discussing a mural for the estate as a finishing touch. Yet only 5 years ago, the estate was regarded locally as virtually a no-go area.
There was a time when we were in the major phase of the consultation where the local police inspector had parked his car over half a mile away because he didn't feel safe to bring it into this area.
But fortunately there was still enough people that had lived here for a long, long time who actually remembered it being better and wanted to do something constructive to help it sort of return to its former glory, shall we say.
It was a group of residents led by Chris Watts whose sheer determination got things moving in the first place. But they realised virtually from the beginning that they needed outside help to enable them to cooperate with local agencies and to help formulate plans that they were happy with, but which would also satisfy professionals. So they recruited Dick Watson from ACTAC, the Technical Aid Network.
So the writing won't end up, I don't think the writing will end up any bigger than that. When I first came down here, the estate was definitely in a spiral of decline, and relationships between the residents and the local authority were understandably very poor. So it was crucial, particularly in those early stages, that residents got their support, they got their technical help and advice, they got their management help and advice from an independent third party, and I think that's where I fitted into the project.
Eventually, after a long struggle, estate action money was granted for the total refurbishment of the estate. Crucially, the residents were involved in every aspect of its design.
The design of the layout of the street was basically done by the residents because they know best what the problems are, etc. We've got car parking areas which we never had before. The reason for this was because it was not safe to park the cars in the back lane, and therefore bringing them in meant that they could be overseen from like the 3 blocks around them. Then we have the bin bays. These were also parked out the back and caused a lot of problems, where they used to take them out into the road and burn them. Now we have them in nice little secure bin bays where they're locked. The washing lines were put in this space for the same reason, so that they can be overlooked and kept an eye on, because washing did tend to disappear from time to time.
The residents are now also deeply involved in the actual running of the estate. They have an overall majority on the Estate Management Board, though the City Council and other agencies are also represented. Indeed, this multi-agency approach prompted a wide range of projects on the estate, including a number of community art schemes involving local school children.
We started off down the school, and then we were asked to go down to this room. So we went down to this room and we had to draw these like pictures, and then they told us that the drawing was going to be made into metalwork, then be painted and put onto a gate.
This is my owl, and first we drew it on paper, then we had to paint it ourselves, and I painted all mine myself.
This is my octopus. First we drawed it, then they turned it into metal. This is my shark. We put blue on the top, then blue up, then white at the bottom, both sides. This is my boat. We drawned it and we put different colours on it.
There's a key change in people's aspirations, in what people want to do. We've now got a young person from this estate at university for the first time in many years. We've got somebody at Dartmouth College on an officer scholarship, and this is a complete change in community aspirations, in its belief in itself.
It was new for everybody. It was a new venture. It was a new way of working. The benefits are untold. In terms of the human side of the regeneration, and we've all learned from the lesson.
I mean, it's not just been about the physical improvement, it's about restoring confidence in people, and that was something that was very lacking when we began. But people have built confidence, they've learnt new skills, they've got new flats, they're managing them, and it's really good.
Well, before, when it was all broken down, you didn't feel proud of it, but you've got something to look after now, and being on the ground floor, you can clean your garden and stuff like that, so you have something to look after.
Glyntaff, a peripheral estate near Pontypridd, was a subject of another study relating to ways of getting tenants involved in the process of regeneration. The report was written by Anne Holmes, and 5 years later she's returned to Glyntaff to see what progress has been made since she was last there.
Priority for people living in these houses, I think, is how am I going to manage the week, you know, how am I going to live the week?
I remember when I was here, we talked quite a lot about the way people living here felt that other people looked down on them because they lived here. Has that changed at all?
I think it's going to be a real hard job to overcome the feeling of the stigma, because it's been here for so many years. And yes,
the profile of this estate, in terms of people's background, income levels, unemployment levels, school experience, lack of qualifications, all those things are typical. What is atypical is the group of residents, a growing group, who've been able to motivate, to change things, to gather confidence, to be able to take professionals on very competently indeed.
The achievements of the tenants at Glyntaff may seem atypical, but they're not beyond the reach of ordinary people. Any resident, given the right opportunities and encouragement, can play an active role. Two of the community activists on the estate in the early days were Jean and Ashley Williams. They remember the dreadful problems caused by the appalling design of the estate.
I lived here for 15 years and, you know, very often we would have raw sewage coming up into the kitchen sink. You know, the children were always ill. They were always, I was always going for the doctors for antibiotics for them, you know. Because there were no play areas, there was no community centre, there was nothing.
There was also one extraordinary oversight by the planners. They installed all-electric heating, and the houses had no fireplaces or chimneys, something the tenants would never have agreed to if they'd been consulted in the first place.
Because many of the people in this community at the time were receiving free coal. Well, it was incredible. I mean, this was the late 60s. This is was one of the biggest mining areas in Britain. I mean, we were on the doorstep of the Rhondda Valley, you know. Our parents worked in the pit, many of our relatives worked in the pit. Here we were in these brand new, beautiful houses up on this estate where we couldn't burn coal, you know. It just seemed such an ironic thing for us in the valleys.
Since then, a lot of physical changes have been made to the estate. There's a brand new community centre, and eventually all parts of the estate will be refurbished.
I think magnificent work has been done on this estate, and it's one of the best examples I know, precisely because it was engendered from the bottom upwards and not imposed from the top downwards. That said, it is a mammoth task. I mean, I was learning just this morning how, yet again, massive monies available for capital projects, very little available in the way of revenue, even less available in the way of monies for outreach work, training and those sort of things.
But one of the clear messages of all the research is that training is vital to enable residents to participate effectively in this process of change.
We need to be addressing how we unleash the potential rather than how we swamp it by the proven potential of other people.
One of the things that I've always tried to do is make people realise, you know, it's not that they failed in education, it's that education failed them, you know. And there are people who have, you know, helped to run the credit union, who have organised children, youth clubs. So many people with so many talents. It's unbelievable, you know.
And I think the catalyst of all that community action came from the Tenants Association. You know, so one community group was able to become the catalyst for community development, for personal development, and for getting the community involved in redesigning the estate, taking control, taking responsibility, developing cooperation and trying to work with other agencies, really, to sort out some of the problems in this estate.
This has also enabled tenants themselves to become community workers, like Ellen Cronin.
If you'd asked me 10 years ago, or if you'd said to me 10 years ago, you're going to be a paid worker for the community centre, I would have laughed at you because I just didn't have that confidence. I was one of the volunteers that came in the beginning and, believe it or not, afraid to speak up, you know, afraid of speaking at the wrong time and making a fool of yourself and everything else that comes along with it. But because I've been involved so long, and been, you know, I've helped set up women's groups and different things. My confidence is built, and yeah, I believe in myself now, and I believe I'm worthy of the job and the pay I get, you know.
Another paid worker, Karen Thomas, also started as a volunteer, setting up a mothers and toddlers group. She's now carrying out a skills survey on the estate.
The reason for the skills survey is that we can find out what skills are on the estate, not qualifications, paper qualifications, but real skills, and also to find out the training needs on the estate.
Would you like to answer some questions for us?
And so I think there does need to be efforts to engage people in basic confidence acquisition.
And experiencing it.
And I think that is best done by training by other residents. So I think the key task in many ways is training residents to be trainers of other residents. I think it's a snowballing process.
But perhaps the most sophisticated form of tenant representation can be found on Wester Hales, a large estate on the edge of Edinburgh. The main voice of the local community is the Rep Council, and each year nearly 100 representatives of the community meet for its annual general meeting.
I think the Rep Council has lots of power, lots of influence, shall we say. Before anything happens in Wester Hales, the Rep Council is consulted for a community view. I'd like to think that nothing happens in Wester Hales without the community saying so, and I think that that's probably true.
Thank you.
The election of a whole range of community representatives is an essential part of the meeting, including the election of a number of different spokespeople, covering a wide range of issues, from childcare to housing itself.
My task as housing spokesperson for the Rep Council is to take forward issues that are identified by the membership of the whole Rep Council, which is anything coming from any of the 28 neighbourhood councils as a whole or individually. Like where we are now, the community identified that it didn't want high-rise flats anymore, which was bad housing. They wanted low-rise family housing with gardens, something that the majority of people in Wester Hales have never had before. Wester Hales had 24 high-rise blocks. When all this started, it will end up with 6. And they've had refurbishment now. That is a major achievement. And to regenerate an area, it means getting employment for the area, making sure that there are facilities, whether it be a decent shopping centre, having post boxes, phone boxes, a bus service, a cinema, an ice rink, whatever it takes. And it all adds to the regeneration because it can't stand alone. Housing regeneration means more than just housing. It has to have everything that goes with it.
One of the things that really stops people being involved is childcare. So we've decided that because it's such a big issue, that a large part of our urban aid budget should be spent on providing childcare for local people. So wherever there's a meeting going on, we offer childcare, good quality childcare. And we think that if people want to go back to work or into training or education, they should be offered childcare. I think we have quite a sophisticated structure within the Rep Council, within the community organisation of Wester Hales. But yes, I think it does work. It most definitely works. Our funders invest lots of money every year. Over £500,000 every year is invested into that one organisation. So I think they think it works as well. I know they think it works.
Wester Hales is one of 4 Scottish partnership areas covered by research carried out by the University of Glasgow.
I think the important thing about the Wester Hales partnership is that it began with many difficulties. It was a reluctant partnership in many ways from the outset. Additionally, once the partnership began, here in Wester Hales there is a very powerful community. There are very many active people in the community. They are very articulate, they are very knowledgeable about the process of regeneration. You may think this is the ideal situation for a partnership. However, the agencies find it difficult to come to terms with a community which can speak for itself, for its wider population, in an articulate and professional way.
The partnership moves along with its own agenda, and I think sometimes that's quite difficult for the community because the community is working to its own agenda, which quite often is it's a slower pace. Local people have to be consulted. I think that people get quite annoyed when they have to slow the pace down in order to keep the community on board. But I think that people generally find that if the community is consulted, if they're kept on board, they can be very helpful. If they're not consulted, they can be a real pain, you know.
Comprehensive and regeneration of estates, which is going to last, needs partnership. I think there can be no dispute about that. It's taking a long time for many of these areas to go into decline. It will take a long time and a lot of resource and a lot of goodwill on the part of different agencies for them to be regenerated. I think that's the first major lesson. We need partnership. We need to give partnerships time. Partnership working is not an easy process. And the organisations that go into these partnerships must go in with a recognition and a willingness to work, to make partnership work. Partnership's about negotiation, it's about concession, it's about coming to terms with situations where you don't get your own way.
Most major partnerships have seen economic regeneration and job creation as one of their major priorities. They've met with varying degrees of success, but Waltham Forest Hat, or Housing Action Trust, has undoubtedly addressed the issue with more commitment and energy than most. One of their first priorities is employing residents themselves, like Tony Warren.
As a resident and an employee of the Hat, I see it from both sides, as it were. I see from a tenant's point of view in terms of improved services, employment opportunities. From the Hat's point of view, I see it as a challenge to meet tenants' expectations, and not just building bricks and homes, but making homes out of them, making tenants feel a part of it.
Another priority of the Hat is to make sure that building contractors employ local people.
So it's made clear at tendering stage and from then onwards that we expect 20% local labour and 10% trainees on site. It's an actual requirement. It's not a goodwill gesture.
The Hat also run a purpose-built training centre to help give local residents the sort of skills they need to get a job.
For us in the short term, the major new creation of jobs has been around the work on the sites. So in the short term, that's been our major push. What we're doing now is trying to branch out, recognising that long-term sustainable jobs are more in maintenance than new construction.
For some residents, one-to-one counselling is the most effective way of getting them back into employment or training.
In essence, we have large numbers of people that live on the estates that are unemployed and have been unemployed for a number of years. We just try and make sure that residents are quite clear about what it is that they perhaps want to do, and they're aware of the commitments and the responsibilities that they need to take on board when they actually go forward for a job or for a training course. We've got a very good track record, but it is a very long process.
Part of this targeting is to support local community business ideas. For instance, Kitty De Silva is a local resident who runs the canteen for construction workers on the site.
I'm one of the luckiest people, I think, to be running the business like this. I think that's fantastic. Give me a chance to do what I always wanted. If I was out there on my own, I don't think I'll ever manage. It came true, I'm 36 years old, now I've got my own business, which in a million years I don't think I would have if I was out there, isn't it? It's a big break, very big break. From a nobody to a somebody. I feel I'm somebody, yes I am. Yeah.
Capacity building's another phrase that's current in the 90s, but it has a very simple meaning. It's enabling individuals to have the skills they need to get by for themselves and their families, and it's raising the skill of the community to negotiate with people who are making decisions about services and things that affect that community.
Well, I think the bottom line is it's given a lot of people hope where things were pretty miserable, I mean, you've got to think that a lot of people were beginning to think they'd been abandoned here, and I think the Hat's changed a lot of that. We've got housing in the future now, there's jobs and opportunities for people, and I think it goes a lot deeper than that, because it's also about the sort of more collective empowerment, if you like, the people coming together as groups and actually being able to organise and do things for themselves.
If finding jobs for local residents is one priority for partnerships to address, crime is another. Halton Moor in Leeds used to have an appalling reputation, but their successful crime prevention initiatives have led a group of housing students to come to visit their estate management board to find out what works. After the initial talk, smaller groups are taken on a tour of the estate.
We've formed over the years from an urban crime unit development. We've formed a good working relationship with the police. We don't always agree on but we are now in a position that we do compromise. Yeah. And through this pushing and pushing, we have a good policing strategy on this estate.
The Estate Management Board have been very, very receptive to the ideas that the police have put forward to help. And equally, we've tried to assist them in every way possible with the ideas that they've put forward. And between us, because the whole thing has been a partnership, we've come to some successful solutions. Most of the crime problems on the estate relate to joyriding and the misuse of motor vehicles.
We used to get the car thieves drive around the estate and dispose of the cars in the woods and set them alight because it's easy to escape from the police in the woods. The design consultant suggested that we put up the standard bollards to prevent the cars going through, and from our experience we knew that the standard bollard didn't work because a car could hit it and snap it off at the base. So we worked with the design consultants and came up with a suggestion of the mushroom, which allowed people access through there but would actually rip the engine out of a car if they went trying to get through.
Well, they certainly seem to have stopped people driving their cars. At one time there was 3 or 4 cars every week driving in there and being burnt out. We don't seem to have that problem now.
And of course the trees have been able to be planted now, haven't they?
That's true,
it looks
yeah,
so much
yeah.
better.
I know the youth workers are planning a conservation group and they're going to get the young people involved in maintaining the trees.
Residents and police have also cooperated over the installation of closed-circuit TV.
But when people ring the bell, they see the person who rings via their TV screen in their own living room. And that's proved very successful because in addition to just hearing voices over the internal phone, they can actually see people and check it is their friend or whoever calling for them. It's all been about consultation, speaking to each other and seeing what we can do to help the estate as a whole. So it's just common sense, speaking to the people and seeing what they see as their problem and then tackling that problem.
It's a partnership, and the only way things will work is by having a partnership, not them going one way and us going another, just all coming together, bringing it all together, and it's working, I'm pleased to say.
The Joseph Rowntree Foundation's Action on Estates programme has focused on a number of similarly successful initiatives, but it has become increasingly concerned with what policies are needed to make sure that estate improvements last and don't wither away once funding is removed. Indeed, this was the theme of one complete research study by Jeff Fordham.
I think traditionally when professionals have approached neighbourhoods and estates that are in need of regeneration, they've thought that it's important that they do things for or to the estate. I think that the lessons of the Made to Last study are that there needs to be a change of culture in which the professionals are prepared to share authority, share decision making, share power with the people who live in those areas.
This is what York City Council have tried to do on their Bell Farm estate, instigating with the local Residents Association a series of written agreements.
Residents on the estate will have a copy delivered to them explaining what the agreements are about and what to do if services aren't delivered to their satisfaction. So at one level people can report any problems to services themselves.
But the agreements they're absolutely marvellous because we have got contacts, we know who to go to, whereas before we just didn't know anybody. And of course then every quarter we meet the bosses of all these agencies every quarter, and we then speak to them and say, look, you're not doing your job here, and could you please look into this, and then hopefully it'll be sorted out.
Though negotiations between the Residents Association and the City Council haven't always been plain sailing.
We've had a partnership this last 3 years, and I've had a few set-tos with them over it. And then they said, yes, I'm sorry, we should have consulted you, but we're all new, it's all something new.
Obviously, as we've worked together, there have been issues that have come along. We've not always seen eye to eye. We've talked those issues through. We've sometimes changed things to pick up on what the Residents Association are saying, because they are closer to what people want.
We fought hard to get this money, and like the agreements now are, to help us to keep it looking like this.
So people have had a stake in what's been done so far, and we feel that because of that approach, people will continue to look after the estate to pick up any problems if they see issues occurring.
And it's going to help us to stop it going back to what it was. I really feel this, and I know that everybody with me feels this as well. But the work is just beginning, because it's no good spending 6.2 million and then just turning your back and walking away. As I've said to them, that's no damn good, is it?
Another key message is the need for authorities to plan beyond the life of specific projects, right from their initial planning stages.
Most of the initiatives the government fund are short-term, but the important thing is to leave behind institutions that are located in the communities that are designed to benefit and that have some chance of surviving. I mean, the Chalks project in Leeds is a good example.
Right, so 3 things you must do.
Chalks is a project which is designed to provide supplementary education for kids from 6 to 16 in information technology and computer skills.
Schools by themselves cannot deliver all that's required, okay? And kids go to school because, on the whole, it's compulsory, right? But what you need, if what you need is somewhere for kids to go where it's more voluntary, where they feel like they're getting, it's more benefit to them and they're getting it. You don't have to force them to go; they want to come. The ones which the schools are failing, in effect, end up on the streets in Chapter and Harehills and other inner city areas, get into petty crime, drugs, child prostitution, all sorts, in order to survive. Mainly because they don't have the other skills they need to make use of mainstream employment, and also because they don't have the skills, who's going to employ them?
In many cases, the kinds of neighbourhoods that have been addressed by these sorts of regeneration programmes have suffered from years, in some cases decades, of underinvestment and neglect, and invariably governments want to try to improve things in very short timescales. Reversing 20 years of neglect isn't something you can do overnight, and therefore you have to be conscious of building programmes that will continue to work after the short-term funding initiatives pulled out.
So how can the key messages of the Rowntree Action on Estates programme be summarised?
Well, I think one of the most important things is not to expect things to happen overnight. Processes are slow, government departments are slow, city councils are incredibly slow. But if you're determined enough and you're willing to put in the work, then it is possible to achieve a great deal. And we've actually achieved far, far more than we ever expected in the beginning.
I think my view would be that on the whole the case for working with residents has been made and won. The question is how. And I think many authorities are still floundering as to how best to do it. And I would go back to saying until the playing field is made more level by putting resources into residents themselves becoming more confident of their own skills, you won't get very far, because otherwise it tends to turn into a top-down process that reinforces the lack of confidence and feelings of inadequacy that you're trying to overcome.
Residents need to be trusted to take control over the future of the estates where they live. And they need to be given time in terms of funding programmes. They need to be given finance if finance is needed, and they need to be given access to their own consultants, their own professionals, so that they can really work up their own scheme for themselves.
I think that the approach to regeneration that's targeted more at focused communities has led in turn to an understanding that you can't just come in, deliver and go away. You actually have to, as part of that work, set up structures that go on. And I think that recognition has been reached. The next part of that challenge is to understand that the structure that you leave has to have some economic or financial viability to it, and that may mean giving it some sort of injection of money or an endowment in some form.
I think there's also a major problem in the way that public finance operates, that it really is extraordinarily difficult for people to get to grips with being given vast sums of money for capital projects that are higher than they actually need, whereas it's all hell on to get the 200 quid that you desperately need to stock a toy library or to get the equipment for a necessary mother and toddler group.
perhaps the most important thing of all that ministers, that local authority councillors, all those responsible must bear in mind is that you can't do this quickly. There is no quick fix. It's going to take time, and you've got to plan for that.
I think the main message in terms of estate regeneration and partnership is that, quite frankly, the partners must go in prepared to be partners. It's not good enough for local authorities and central government to make statements about how the community must be on board. They must believe in what they say. They must commit to the principle of working in partnership, A, with each other, and B, with the community. I think this is absolutely the central message of our research.